Well, Smylie, there we have it. Team Europe is the winner of the 2023 Ryder Cup. And listen, it was a furious and spirited rally from Team USA on Sunday in singles. It looked like for a second there was a path to a win for the Americans, but it ends up 16.5 to 11.5 in the Europeans' favor, and amazing celebrations that ensued. You said before the Ryder Cup began, we were going to see a lot of excitement at the 16th hole, and boy, did we, all week long. And that is, of course, where the Ryder Cup ended, with Ricky Fowler conceding a birdie putt to Tommy Fleetwood, giving Europe that last half point they needed to clinch. We're going to do an in-depth breakdown of this Ryder Cup later in the week, and we'll get to a little bit here. But I just want to start with the atmosphere, like how cool it was being there. You talked about this yesterday, being on site. There were people swimming in the pond on 16 that you got on video and put on your social accounts. The CAMPEONES chants we saw at the trophy podium, it felt like we were watching a Premier League or a Champions League win. I just want to hear from you, atmosphere-wise, where this event ranks for you amongst all the events, maybe golf or otherwise, that you've been to.
Man, it trumps anything I've ever been a part of in golf. I mean, it's not even close, really, either. I've been in the final group of the Masters, and what I saw this week was cooler than that. And that's, listen, it's you can't beat major championship, winning a major championship, beating an entire field, but playing with a team, playing with other players, it's something you don't get to do week in and week out. And the Europeans embraced it. So do the Americans, and there was a lot of question marks whether they were a close-knit team, but I think there were a lot of conflicting reports that tried to turn this American team against each other a little bit. But as you saw today, there was a ton of fight in that American squad, and it always feels like in singles play that the Americans are always never out of it, because the Europeans are just so good in the foursomes, and they've been pretty good in the best ball as well. But really, those foursomes proved to be the difference this week, because they got very interesting towards the end. Really, the energy to start the day, there was a lot of blue on the board in the first 4 or 5 matches, and I'm thinking to myself, man, this is going to be an absolute stinker today. I thought that Europe may win the session, meaning all of the 12. Talking about the 12 matches, if they win, 6 points or more, they would win the session. I thought they were going to do that, and I thought they could sneaky blow out the Americans to where it would be a record-breaking points amount that the Europeans might get, but that didn't end up happening. I think when the middle of the lineup teed off, a lot of red got on the board, and then it started kind of shifting towards. And when Jon Rahm and Scottie Scheffler got on, I'd say their 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th hole were like, hold on, there's a lot of red in the middle of this. And it actually really seems like this match with Jon Rahm and Scottie Scheffler could be the difference if everything holds true. But it was a huge half that Jon Rahm got, because it just gave them a little bit of that wiggle room for a guy like Tommy Fleetwood at the end to get that half, or if anybody else would have turned it around, like Matthew Fitzpatrick, if he would have gotten a half out of that Max Homa match, which definitely can't wait to talk about in depth about Max Homa's week. Just the stones that he had to make that putt, but man, overall, just back to kind of the atmosphere in general, the crowds, like insane, the jingles and the songs. Like Francie and I have had a different song in our head every 30 minutes because there's so many. And whether it's cheering about the players or cheering just about just something random, like one of them was, if you're handsome and stomp your feet, and then everybody in the stands would stomp their feet. It's not, all we have at USA events is USA chants, and I believe that we can win, and we can do so much better than that. So much better.
So much better. I mean, it was lit. I was watching Tommy Fleetwood's interview, and just the whole crowd that just behind him would not stop singing Tommy, Tommy, Tommy. And it was just
so cool, man.
Some of it's so simple. And I think part of it's so interesting, the difference in fan culture not to sound overly snooty here, but I'm a Tottenham fan. I've been over to watch a couple of matches at the old White Hart Lane. And when you go there for the first time as an American and you're sitting there and you're listening to just these songs that at first it could sound a little bit, you're thinking, is this a little corny? Is this a little cliche? But it creates sort of an energy and an atmosphere that is it's just different. It's just, it gets everybody involved in sort of a collective. And I think that, it may sound silly, but there's something there about just giving your team a little bit of go. Guys, again, in a soccer and a football sense, we'll talk about hearing a song and kind of giving them a little bit of extra energy in the middle of the match where they need something, and they leverage that into a win. I think we saw that this week. I'm curious too. We're talking about differences here between American crowd, American atmosphere, and both teams. One that has been talked about kind of, since the things ended, I'm watching press conferences, I'm hearing Jordan Spieth answer questions about it, is the difference in the prep leading into the Ryder Cup. And there was a lot made of, we talked about in this podcast, at length about the Europeans playing a lot of competitive golf and the lead up to the Ryder Cup. We talked about the BMW PGA Championship, all 12 guys make the cut. 7 of those guys finished in the top 10. And the only 2 Americans who played after the Tour Championship were Max Homa and Justin Thomas of the Fortinet, and they're responsible for 5 of Team USA's 11.5 points this week. So I just wonder, let's play this forward a little bit. Let's look to Bethpage Black in 2025. Could you see Team USA trying to play more events in the lead up to that? And could you see some of those events being DP World Tour events, just given the way the PGA Tour schedule, works out on a yearly basis?
Well, just to kind of start on all that, yes, the Americans were not informed to start the day. On Friday, they got punched in the gut immediately thinking, that we are informed, but then you get out there and then you, especially in that alternate shot format, it's a very uncomfortable way to play golf. And really you have to be in such good form because it's so awkward. And I thought it was very, very smart by the Europeans to start out the Ryder Cup with the foursomes in the morning, which has not been traditional. And yeah, man, I definitely think going into the next Ryder Cup, that is going to be a huge topic of conversation and maybe it's back towards the European side too. Mm-hmm. Are they going to continue to play over there before the Ryder Cup? Because I think there's an element of jet lag, a long week, a hot week. And when we kind of turn the page towards Bethpage in a couple of years, it's potentially going to be cooler. The guys do have an opportunity to play over on our side of the pond, playing PGA Tour fall events if they'd like. And it'd be easier to do that and not have to go play across the country on the West Coast and then try to get over to Rome. So I definitely understand why the travel logistics didn't make sense. Like, would it be better to be more rested or play? And I can definitely see why guys definitely took time off. But and just one more last thing on the crowds and kind of made me think of Bethpage and just a typical New York crowd and how crazy they are and how aggressive they can be. This week in Rome was incredible in the fact that I never really felt like it was hostile. Like it was a great crowd, and the fact that they were cheering for their guys, the cap thing was about as hostile as I ever heard. Yeah. And I remember the Europeans complaining about the fans at Whistling Straits, saying they were saying all these nasty things, this and that. I never got that from this European crowd, and I can't attest to the Whistling Straits stuff because I wasn't there, but still, it was, I feel like the game of golf was in a really good place this weekend with this crowd and the players, and it just was a fantastic Ryder Cup, and definitely one to remember for sure.
Just to go off on a tangent for a second, because you noted it there about that relationship between the crowd and the players and sometimes the caddies and the captains. I thought it was really cool at the end to see the entire American team go over and shake each hand of the European players. And obviously I was wondering how long that line went. Like, are we going to see a Joe LaCava, Rory McIlroy handshake? But we of course did not. But I think that was a cool moment to kind of bring it back together and just emphasize the sportsmanship of this entire event. I think it is worth kind of trying to put a bow on this whole Rory, Joe LaCava, Shane Lowry, Patrick Cantlay, Bones storyline. it was interesting. There were reports that came out at the beginning of the day that said, he met with Joe LaCava overnight, and
yeah, it's weird because
and then Carr Banks asked,
we confirmed
Carr
asked
him.
It was really odd because we apparently, according to our sources, that they had met, so we wouldn't report it unless we had confirmation on it, and then the interview was like opposite of that. So.
Well, so here's just the
sure.
detail on that. It's because he told Carr Banks twice, I did not meet with Joe. But then in that handshake line, we heard on a hot mic him talking to Steve Stricker, and he said, I texted Joe, we're okay. Just the whole thing is interesting. If you really want to get meta with this and you want to zoom out and just talk about the whole media week at large, like with reports on the Patrick Cantlay thing, what was the kind of the feeling out there of just that whole, it was like this third actor. It's like you have the crowd, the fans, but then like these reports in the media and just the influence that had on the entire week. I wonder what your overall sense of that is as you come out of the week.
Well, I think it had an effect on today's matches. I think it fired up both teams, and I think both teams came out with more passion today and in that singles play. But when we had talked about it last night, the only video I had seen was the Rory McIlroy yelling video at Joe LaCava. I was taking your word for everything I saw that you saw on the 18th green, and my perspective has changed
I did
a
not
little
see
bit.
That. I did not see that additional angle either. I assume that's what you're talking about. The full video.
Yeah. And I remember you. Well, first off, I thought you said the match was a halved match as well. Like that was to win the match for Cantlay.
Yes, I was saying Rory's putt was to have the match. Rory had a birdie putt.
So I misheard all of it. So
we
didn't. I'm just going to clean that up a little bit from yesterday, and the fact that I saw both sides of it, but now I don't see both sides of it.
Okay.
So I am 100% team Rory on this. Joe LaCava was in the wrong. Joe LaCava is a great guy. I know Joe LaCava. He's very well respected from the entire golf community. Working for Tiger Woods on the bag and so many other great players. And he was 100% in the wrong. Rory McIlroy had already started his routine. And when a player is in their routine and a caddy inserts themselves into the action, that is 100% wrong. It should not have happened. And Roy had every single right to be upset about the situation. And last night, I don't think I saw both sides of it. I saw Joe's side to try to protect his man, which I get. But from what the other angle I saw, he was doing the hat thing to the American team. And it wasn't towards Shane Lowry. And so I saw this the wrong way. I looked at it the wrong way, and just wanted to say that definitely Joe was in the wrong, and Roy definitely got maybe a little bit too upset about it. But I definitely see where he's coming from, and I would be upset too, because if somebody did that to me in a big moment like that, where a big putt like that, you lose a little bit momentum and give a little bit of hope back to the American side coming in today. It proved to not be an issue in the end, and the fact that the Europeans won by 5 points, but still that whole situation definitely one to remember. And I think we'll keep an eye on stuff with Patrick Cantlay moving forward, what's true, what's not true with him. And the fact that everything that he said in interviews was the fact that everything was a lie. And do we know that to be true? I don't believe the locker room stuff and the fact that Patrick and Xander were sitting in a different area. The hat thing I can understand if the hat doesn't fit, because are you a big head guy? I can't remember if you're like a
huge head guy.
Okay, so you understand a tight fitting hat, so I can understand. Okay, so I can understand
we
that.
We did a whole segment on this podcast about how to iron your big hats so they sit down, because we cannot figure it right. I mean, I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I had not seen that angle, and we got a lot of comments on YouTube about this. And by the way, absolutely love it. Even if you're disagreeing with us, the engagement and the conversation is fantastic. So
are we getting smoked on it?
I got smoked on it, which I think is fair. I did not see the other angle. And so, I think the main point being made is that, I didn't have that extra angle and know the extent of what Joe LaCava did. And I think upon seeing that angle where he continued to back into his line, and Rory, actually, you can see him watching Joe back up, and he's not saying anything yet. But then when Joe really comes close to his field of vision, he says something, and then Joe kind of goes after him. That's an angle I hadn't seen at that point. And I agree with you. I mean, now that having been said, I like it all for the entertainment value. Like I think that it's fair to stick up for Rory and say that was a Bush League move by Joe LaCava, but I like what it adds to the theater, the whole event, and I think that and you heard guys talking about this today. I think Cantlay said something to this effect where he's like, "Yeah, I was getting it from the crowd all week long, and I love it." Like that's the way this should be. People should care about this. People should be invested in it. The stuff that's on the borderline, it's maybe some of the stuff is out of bounds, but largely it's nice to have the home crowd going after the visiting players. And sometimes the visiting players saying something to the crowd and making it feel elevated and different. That's why it's the Ryder Cup. That's why it's different. But I do think your clarification is important there, because that angle coming out on the later end was like, wait a second, I don't know that was, I understand. I will say this. I can understand Joe LaCava carrying the bag for his guy all day long and just hearing it and wanting to stand up for his guy. But there's a way to do that that's different from
100%.
Actually impacting a putt that could have had the match and saved a half point for Europe. So definitely want to keep an eye on. I'm curious if this bleeds over the next
one last bow on that as well is even if he doesn't feel comfortable saying it to the media or the public about complaining about the Ryder Cup players not being paid, I am on team the players 100% should be paid for this.
Totally agree.
If you go out there and you see all the hospitality and you see how much money the PGA of America makes on this event, these players should be paid for this. And there's going to be people that listen to this and say, this is separate from guys getting paid. Like, they shouldn't be paid because this is history. These players haven't been paid since the beginning of this thing. It's just, let's look in the mirror here and let's go look and see how much money the PGA makes on this. And if you go see that big old building in Frisco, like, it's from this event. And I just think the players should get a little cut. And whether it's I don't know what the cut should be. I mean, it may be something like $100,000 a guy. And I think every guy would be like, you know what? That's, at least it's something, and that's that right there. That's $1.2 million. I've read, and you shouldn't be quoted specifically on this, but I've seen that on average, the PGA of America makes upwards of $30 million a year on this event. So you're taking out $1.2 million to make it worth the while for these guys. I don't think that that's unfair. And I think it's like these guys are generating some form of value. Like, I'm sorry, the whole, love of the game thing, that feels like it falls in the same bucket as like, why we're not paying collegiate athletes, which is kind of a farce to me for all the value that's generated. Why don't we just kind of like say that if the United States basketball team, the NBA's best players, go and play in Europe against the Europeans' best players in a basketball series, do you think the players would say, yeah, we'll do it for free? I just don't. There's a ton of history with this and why the guys aren't being paid, but I think it's something that it's eventually going to get addressed, and we can go into it later. But that's just something I wanted to tie a bow on and say that this isn't taboo. This isn't something that players can't not talk about, because I think they have a legitimate argument here.
Yeah, and listen, we're kind of running short on our time here for this recap, and like I said, we will have a full recap later in the week getting into this. What I'm excited to talk about later this week is going to be the way that Europe rode their horses. Rory, 4 points earned this week. Victor Hovland, 3.5. John Rahm, 3. Tommy Fleetwood, 3. Tyrrell Hatton, 3. I mean, those guys showed up in a huge way for the Europeans. On the American side, Max Homa was the only American to win more than 2 points, 3.5 points. So, maybe some quick thoughts on that group there, knowing that we're going to kind of unpack this in further depth later on.
Well, for all the avid listeners, they've kind of known where my stance has been on the European team, and the fact that I knew that the 3 best players in the world, outside of what Scotty has done, being the number one player in the world
early this year.
Like those 3 guys. I knew were going to be a big time problem. I felt like maybe 1 or 2 had to have weeks where they only had 1 or 1.5 points. And for all 3 of those guys to be just the stalwarts that they were, it was going to be an issue. And then, the 2 sleepers that I had on both teams, the guy that really showed up and outside of Tommy Fleetwood, who was a guy I actually had more, I didn't consider him a sleeper. I considered him to be one of the top players
Studs,
outside of those three, but was Tyrrell Hatton. I felt like Tyrrell Hatton hasn't shown up at majors. He's been very good on the DP World Tour, winning a lot over there. I don't think he's won maybe once on the PGA Tour. He hasn't knocked down the door, like I said, of any major championships. This was a big week for him. I felt like he played really well, and the fact that he got 3 points and he was one of their best players, they couldn't have Hatton play bad. They couldn't have Matthew Fitzpatrick have a bad week, because outside of that, you just didn't know what you were going to get. We kind of knew how good their young talent was in that European room, but we didn't know if they'd show up. So I think when you look at it now with the beginning of the year of what this European team was going to look like and what it looks like now and the result they got, I mean, just the job that Luke Donald did, setting up this golf course, getting this team to believe in each other, and taking down an American team that they were, as Patrick Harrington said on our podcast with Beef, they written them off as dead and no chance in Rome. Why even show up? But tell you what, for a long time there, it looked like they were going to be the all-time leading point scorer in Ryder Cup history. So what a week for Europe and Luke Donald and that entire team and their top players carrying the load and all the jingles and stuff from the fans that keep me interested the whole time as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Beef, because as we speak, we've got the crack Smylie Show team of Taylor is working on your measurements for the Alabama jersey that you're going to be wearing to pay off this bet. So, I think you're going to look great in crimson.
Shut up, dude.
I'm just excited to
stop talking.
And, maybe we can come up with a fun jingle for that. Smylie in the crimson, Smylie in the crimson, in the.
I hate it here.
Well, I'll tell you what, really fun week, fun to interact with a lot of people, listeners and viewers of the show, on the subject of the Ryder Cup. Had a little drama last night and had a little bit of drama this morning. So it turned out to be a good one. And, like we said, we're going to continue discussing this, maybe with some players involved as well, as we kind of, get a little further.
We're not done talking about it.
We're not done talking about this. So we appreciate you joining us for the ride this week. Oh, one more from.
I just want to go and put my nomination for captain for the Bethpage US team.
Tiger
Woods.
Cat? The big cat?
Tiger Woods.
I love that. Did you hear Zinger say Tiger and Sergio?
Tiger and Sergio? He said that on air?
He said that on air.
Oh man, so he already took my lane and ran with it. So everybody already knows.
I think Tiger was the obvious one, but I think Sergio.
Okay.
I mean, if we find a way back with the whole live thing, hey Sergio, I tell you what, Sergio, pay $700,000 and then you can be the captain of Team Europe at Bethpage. How's that sound?
I guess he could captain. There was the vice captains for the European side. It was just an odd bunch of group of guys. It was the Molinares and Colsar. Like it was a very interesting group, and the fact that it wasn't very recognizable compared to the U.S. side, which had Freddie Couples, Davis Love, Steve Stricker, Jim Furyk, guys that are so recognizable. What Europe did this week, I mean, it was incredible.
Eduardo with the stats. I mean, that's the type of stuff that makes a difference. So, a lot of fun recapping it. We appreciate everybody listening and watching, and we will be back here on Thursday, I think, with a new episode. We'll see. We'll talk to you then.